Hi, book people. First of all, the balls to write this book. So I thought I would do like a what I've been reading lately, because I got to 10 books, and that just seems like a lot of books for one video. Linked below if you like any of these books. I actually really liked most of these. I'm excited to talk about them. So I'm gonna go in order of reading. So the last book I do will be the most you don't care, you're not keeping a log. It's fine. Okay. So the first book I read since the last time I talked about books is called Any Person is the Only Self by Elisa Gabbert. And this is a book of essays, which I've been trying to get into, and you can tell I pinned a lot of notes. And I would call this essays about books and writing from a writer. And she starts in the pandemic and she talks about how people felt, and I really liked that. I love to read books set during the pandemic. I think some people think it's too soon, but I really feel like a lot of people have memory hold it, and so it's nice to just get confirmation that that actually happened. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. I'm gonna say something devastating, so I hope the author never watches this video, but all the best parts of this book were quotes from other authors. Like the title, Any Person is the Only Self, is a quote. So I really enjoyed it though. Okay, next I read Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green, and I've already talked about this on my channel, but I really, really liked it. It was a very hopeful book. I feel like I needed that. I don't know. It really, sometimes the right book hits you at the right time, and this book hit me when I was feeling very negative towards the world, and it turned it around a little bit. So I really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend this, but I already made a video about it. It's fine. So the next book is a weird one. It's called Jimmy Carter, Rivers and Dreams. And this is written by the fishing buddy of President Jimmy Carter. And there's a lot of fishing in here. This is a product of the Bitter Southerner, and I love them. I will buy everything they make all the time, and they make beautiful stuff. Like, this is a beautiful book. It's really nicely made. As someone who complains a lot about how most books are totally shit, these are so good. And I will say that this took me a while to get through. I really like Jimmy Carter. I find history really interesting. There's a lot of fishing in this book, and as someone who's gone fishing a lot, it's just as boring to read about it. I enjoyed it though. I would recommend this to a very specific type of person. Like, this is a dad book. I really like to hear from Jimmy Carter too. He did the foreword, which I think is his last piece of writing, and I liked it fine. I'm not wearing my glasses because it's nighttime. It's very late. I'm drinking coffee because that's normal, and I don't want the reflections from all the light bulbs slapping you. But I also can't see into the viewfinder. I have 20/20 vision, I think, but my astigmatism gets really bad at night when there's lights on, and so it's hard for me to see. If any optometrists are watching this, let me know if that sounds real. Okay. Next, I read Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo by Zora Neale Hurston. Okay. So, I saw this at the thrift store, and it just sounded incredibly interesting. It's an interview with the last living man who was on the last ship that carried slaves from Africa to the Americas. And I'm going to say something embarrassing. I thought Zora Neale Hurston was a modern author. Sweet Zora Neale Hurston was born in the 1800s, and she was a cultural anthropologist. I thought Their Eyes Were Watching God was a modern book. I have not read it. I'm going to look for it at a thrift store next time I see it, because now I'm just really interested. But this was heartbreaking and amazing. And I think this only came out a few years ago because there are essays at the start of the book that talked about how this accurate account of what this man went through was not a great look for the post-war period, because I don't know, they were offended at the idea of Black Africans capturing and selling other Black Africans, even though, like, factually that's what happened. And so this wasn't printed for a long time, and it's a shame because it's really, really good. And also, this book is written as the interview, but it's also written in this man's dialect, which I've gone on record before as something I absolutely hate, but I think I'm over it now because it really worked to tell the story, especially because the way he pronounced things, she would have to go and try to figure out what, like, the English version of that word was, because, like, Africa, of course, like, all the colonialism, all the different names for the countries. And so just language was really interesting in this book. But also, the story was really interesting because this is a man who could remember growing up on Africa because he was kidnapped when he was like 19. And he could also remember slavery. And then he lived through the Civil War and was a free man. And it's just such a fascinating story. He becomes free, but of course it's not like all of a sudden things are really good for Black people in the American South. I don't even know how to describe it. It was fascinating to hear from the human being what it was like for someone to walk up to you and be like, you're not enslaved anymore. He talks about how he ended up working for one of his previous owners, like, as just a worker, and like he had to have conversations with him, and it's wild. This was amazing. It's really short, and I wish it was so much longer. The village he was from was raided and destroyed. So all of his people were either murdered or they were sold. So he's like the last person of his people, and when he brings up Africa, he weeps. But he's also the last of his family. Like, his children have died, and he weeps because they never got to go to Africa. And they talked about how in his youth they had talked about, like, getting a ship and going back, but there was nothing to go back to. It was devastating and really good. Okay, next I read one of the books I said I would read last year, The Once and Future Sex by Eleanor Janega. I just watched a YouTube video with her. It was really good, and she pronounced her name, and I was like, oh, that's not how I would have pronounced it. I should remember that. I didn't. I'm sorry. That's rude. I'll link the video below. She's very fun. But this book, fantastic. I loved this book. 5 out of 5 stars. This book is about women in the Middle Ages and the misconceptions you may have about them. Most specifically, I think, the idea that women entered the workforce post-World War II, which, like, that's just not a true thing. And, like, intellectually, you know that that's not a true thing, but people just say that. And you also kind of just think that that's a true thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, women have always had jobs, of course. Like, most of all the people, all of the ever, are poor. And most of all the people of all of ever are farmers. Like, it's not like the women were just gonna sit inside. Do you know what I mean? Like, of course they worked. And I was put off by the length of the book, so I started listening to the audiobook. And I did this thing for the first time where I would listen to the audiobook and then I would pick up and read some and then listen to the audiobook. And it was just a really good experience. I really had a great time. I learned a lot, but also I love the way it was presented. Like, it was just like, people say this thing about women, and it's just not true. Obviously, it's not true. Here's all the evidence for that. Here's what actually happened. And I just found it really refreshing for someone to just be like, obviously women have always had jobs. You know what I think about? Hang on one second. I am knitting a sock, okay? Actually, this is my second sock, so I've already knit one sock. I have the second sock here. I've knit like 5 socks and never managed to make the second sock. But this right here, I mean, I'm new to knitting. I've been knitting for like, I don't know, 6 months. And this probably took me like 7 hours. And I feel like that's a lot of time for a sock, but also, how much faster could I possibly get? Like, imagine if every sock takes me 4 hours, but I'm in the Middle Ages and I have really shitty wool and really shitty needles, and I also have a husband and 7 children to make socks for. Like, how would you have time to do anything else ever? Like, this is work. This is a job, right? making socks for your family would be a full-time job. Like, even this is a job. Like, of course, women have always worked. This book was really good. I'm going to pick it up again so you can see it, because it's also just fucking gorgeous. It's so pretty. Actually, I wish this book had had more pictures. It has some pictures. Yeah, I loved this. If you're at all interested in medieval history, I found this really fascinating. I loved it. And I'm staring at this sock now, and I just want to keep knitting it. I don't know, it's just like, you can't stop. Once you start knitting, you just want to pick it up. You know what I mean? I'm actually really proud of myself. I made myself start a second sock after I finished the first sock, and oh my god, I will be wearing these socks. This is the first time my sock actually looks sock shaped, so it's a really exciting time for me. I have to put it down. Okay. Okay, so the next book I read was also very good. It is called The Three Mothers, How the Mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped a Nation by Anna Malaika Tubbs. This was so good. So this is what it says it is. It's like a history of the mothers of these like very important black men. And she starts off saying, like, of course they also had fathers, but people write about their fathers and no one has talked about their mothers, or at least not in the detail she goes into. So what she does is she starts with their childhoods and like what their families were and how they grow up. And then she kind of goes into like what they chose to do with their life, who they chose to marry, and how they reared their children, and then how they reacted to their sons' achievements and, you know, deaths. And it was so good. And these three women are so different, but also so the same. She really goes into detail on how the actions these women took as mothers affected who their sons would become and why they became who they became. And it was just so good. There is a lot of history in this book about like Black lives in America that I didn't know about, because I honestly, I haven't taken a history class since high school, and we stopped in World War II. And honestly, none of it was ever focused. Like, even when we studied the Civil War, it wasn't about slavery. It was about literally the Civil War and the battles. And I'm ashamed to say that there was so much stuff in here that I didn't know about. Like, Martin Luther King's mom was assassinated. And there was a summer called the Red Summer where all of these black people were just getting lynched and no one was doing anything about it. And it was just, there was so much in this book that was just, like, Malcolm X's mother was institutionalized by the state because of her radical ideas, and her children were taken from her, and she was in an institution for 27 years. Like, that's shocking. That, like, of course all of this stuff happened, but, like, why don't we learn about it? And oh my god. And this was so good. Also, I am not a person who had like a mother. Like, I mean, literally I had one, of course. So it was really interesting for me to read about like actual factual mothers. This is so sad and pathetic what I'm about to say. Actual real life mothers who like cared and loved their children. It was really interesting to see that on the page and see how that affected who those people became. This book was really, really good. If it sounds at all up your alley, you should definitely check it out. Next, I read Beautyland by Marie-Helene Bentino. This book is about an alien who's born on Earth the same time that the Voyager spacecraft is sent to outer space. And her mother is the human, and her mother finds a fax machine one day, and the girl, who's the alien, turns it on and realizes she can fax her, like, people. And so she writes reports on how the humans behave and sends it back to her people. And it shows her life doing that. And I don't know, I guess you could read this as like, this is an alien and here's how she feels about humans. Or you could read this about a person who's obviously neurodivergent and doesn't understand how humans behave. And I don't think that affects how you feel about the story. This book is funny, but it also, like, it feels far away. You don't really, you're not in her story. You're just kind of observing it. I don't know if that makes sense because it's a book, but I I really enjoyed this book, but I also have no idea how to explain it. I don't know, this book was also really sad and I cried. 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, next was a shorty. It was Foster by Claire Keegan, and I have a deep, deep embarrassing thing to say about Claire Keegan, so I heard about this book, and I was like, Irish, short. I'm gonna love that. I should absolutely buy that. And I bought 3 of her books. I don't know how many she has. I bought 3 of her books, all from the thrift store, and I just kept not reading them. So I had all of them, and I was like, I'm gonna love those. Short, Irish, that sounds perfect. I finally read one. Great. I read Foster by Claire Keegan, and it is about a girl growing up in an Irish family that has too many kids. They have too many kids, they have too much work to do, they can't handle it. And the mom is having a baby, so they want to, like, pass off one of the kids so that at least the older ones can do the work. This one's old enough to just go live with some distant relatives. So she goes, and she has a fantastic time. And she's dealing with, like, this isn't my real life, but man, what if it was? And it's a beautiful short story. It was really good. I loved it. I will read the other Claire Keegans. Next, I read a book of poetry called When My Brother Was an Aztec by Natalie Diaz. This, there's a train. This was really interesting because of the context of the book. She's an indigenous person, and she talks about growing up on a reservation and then moving into a neighborhood with more white people. She talks about her family dynamics. Her brother gets addicted to meth. She talks about her history and her family's history and her relationship with America. And it's the poems vary in what I would say, I don't know. As poems, a lot of them are good. Some of them are medium, but the story is all good, and it's kind of funny. I really liked this. I would read it. I finished this today, so this is my last book. This is another one that I listened to while I was reading it, and I kind of like that. Like, so I can just get in the car and start it back up, although it is hard for me to find, like, if I don't stop at a chapter end or a section end, it's hard to find. But I mean, at least I don't have to buy the audiobook because I got it from Libby. This is Doppelgänger by Naomi Klein. First of all, the balls to write this book. This book is about Naomi Klein, who is a famous writer. She actually wrote this book, No Logo, which I haven't read yet. Maybe I should have read that first. But she's like a famous liberal writer. She writes a lot about capitalism and climate change. And her doppelganger is Naomi Wolf, who used to be like a famous feminist writer and now is just a right-wing crazy person on the internet. And she talks about how they get confused for each other online and what that means. And the thing is, she could have written just that, but she goes so much farther. Like, there is so much in this book. She talks about the history of doppelgangers as like a literary device. She talks about, God, her son who has autism. She talks about Palestine and Israel. She talks about what, like, James Baldwin had to say about race and how white people looked at him and saw something he was not, and that's a doppelganger. Like, there's so much in here. This was so good and so thought-provoking. And I don't know, like, even if you think you know what the section is going to be about, she goes a little bit beyond that. I would really recommend this if you like nonfiction. And funnily enough, there's just like one thing I disagreed with her on. There's a lot I don't want to talk about in this book because I think I'm going to talk about it in a different video. But she has this section about how liberals pretend to be inclusive but often like cancel people and kick them out, which is funny because like the one thing I'm going to disagree with her on is where she's also saying liberals are always disagreeing. I just think that that's funny. But I wouldn't kick her out of the liberal space as if I was in control of that. She talks about how it's no war but class war, right? Like the capitalist oligarchs seed like racism and sexism and like trans hate so that we don't realize the workers have all the power and we can just take control of it like a real French Revolution situation. And true, I 100% agree. However, she said that there are people that feel excluded from this type of movement because people keep telling them they have privilege. Like, you have white privilege, get out of here. And I just. Like, if there is a person that exists that gets told that they have white privilege and their reaction is to literally become a Nazi and vote for Donald Trump, like they were looking for a reason to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I understand that it can be hard to hear that you have privilege when you're trying to talk about something. And like sometimes it's inappropriate for someone to bring that up. Do you know what I mean? Some people exist who are like real assholes. Like my favorite Twitter thread of all time where that woman was like, I just love drinking coffee in the garden with my husband every morning. It's the best. And the Twitter ghouls were like, how dare you? I have a disability. I don't even have a garden. What privilege to like be able to afford coffee. Like, those people are just assholes though, right? And if that woman responded to being told she was privileged for having coffee to vote for Donald Trump, to literally go be a Nazi, I mean, she was just looking for a reason to be a Nazi. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's a reason. Is the word capitulate? To just. I don't think there's a reason to put up with someone who's, one, you have privileged step away from being a Nazi. And, like, I agree with the point on a whole. I just think it's really funny that I'm sitting here nitpicking the only section where she was like, are liberals actually tolerant enough? I don't know, but like that just really threw me. That one section really threw me. But this is a great book. I actually had a great reading month. There was so many good books, right? Like, I'm keeping all of them. Has that ever happened? Nice. I'm not reading anything right now, so. Yep.